Hello and welcome back to the channel. Well, a story that's trending right now is the situation where you have the soldier who was in a viral video for his confrontation with a black man in a South Carolina neighborhood. Now, he has been arrested, but of course he's out on bail right now. And the situation is very, very typical of what happens here in America. Now, the reason why it is so typical is because they have grown comfortable. They are very comfortable with saying these things and doing these things because they already know that there is a system in place that is going to support them. Right now, I think he's only looking at about 30 days, if that, They're trying to work up some type of case to say, well, the young man was there already in the neighborhood causing trouble before. But see, that trouble had nothing to do with them, so they had no right. Anyway, I'm going to let you take a listen at additional details in this story if you haven't already heard it, and I will be right back.
A white Army non-commissioned officer depicted in a viral video accosting and shoving a black man in a South Carolina neighborhood has been charged with third-degree assault. Jonathan Pentland, 42, was charged Wednesday and listed as detained in the Richland County Jail and issued a personal recognizance bond, according to online jail records, which did not show him as having an attorney. The video, posted Monday by a woman on Facebook and shared thousands of times, shows a man, identified as Pentland, demanding that a black man leave the neighborhood before threatening him with physical violence. "You're in the wrong neighborhood," Pentland, standing on the sidewalk, can be heard saying to the other man before using an expletive. "I ain't playing with you. I'm about to show you what I can do." According to Cheryl Johnson, who posted the video, the incident happened in a subdivision of the Summit, which has a Columbia address, but is technically outside the city's limits. The video does not show what started the conflict. Johnson did not immediately respond to a message from the Associated Press seeking further details. The recording begins with Pentland, a U.S. Army Sergeant First Class, asking the black man what he's doing in the area. The black man says he was simply walking and not bothering anyone. Throughout the 3-minute video, Pentland continuously demands that the other man leave the neighborhood, getting in his face and, at one point, pushing the man, who almost falls to the ground. "Let's go, walk away," he said. "I'm about to do something to you. You better start walking right now." At the end of the video, a woman who Pentland identifies as his wife can be heard telling the other man that he had picked a fight with some random young lady in the neighborhood, a claim the black man then denies. Johnson said authorities arrived at the scene and only gave Pentland a citation for malicious injury to property for slapping the man's phone out of his hand and cracking it. Officials at Fort Jackson, the U.S. Army's largest basic training facility, said Wednesday they were looking into the incident. On one of its Twitter accounts, base officials also said that U.S. Department of Justice authorities were investigating as well. According to social media accounts connected to Pentland, he has been stationed at Fort Jackson since 2019 and has worked as a drill sergeant at the Garrison, a 53,000-acre complex that trains 50% of all soldiers and 60% of women who enter the Army each year. Asked on Twitter for his response to the video, Fort Jackson Commanding BRIG General Milford H. Beagle Jr. said the behavior displayed in the video is by no means condoned by any service member. "We will get to the bottom of this ASAP," he said. On his official Facebook page, Beagle said Army officials have begun our own investigation and are working with the local authorities. Earlier this year, the Department of Defense announced that Beagle would take over as commanding general at Fort Drum, New York, to be succeeded at Fort Jackson by BRIG General Patrick R. Michaelis. An official transfer date has not been announced. Commenters on the video said they had reached out to the Richland County Sheriff's Department asking for additional charges to be filed. In a release issued early Wednesday, a department spokeswoman said deputies had been dispatched to the neighborhood for an assault call involving one of the men several days before the date of the video, and that all of the matters were under investigation. During an afternoon news conference, Sheriff Leon Lott said the other man in the video was not a juvenile but declined to release his name. Lott said that man had been involved in other incidents in the neighborhood in the days leading up to the video, but said that none of them justified the assault that occurred. "The first time I saw the video, it was terrible. It was unnecessary," Lott said, noting he had met with community leaders and elected officials before speaking with reporters. Lott said his investigators had turned their case over to prosecutors, who determined what charge to levy against Pentland. Pentland did not immediately respond to an email message seeking comment. If convicted, he faces up to 30 days in jail and a $500 fine. State Senator Mia McLeod, who represents the area, said Wednesday on the Senate floor that she had spent much of the previous day in discussions about the incident and planned to meet with the sheriff later in the day. "My sons have a freaking right to live," said McLeod, who is black. Another unarmed black man could be dead today because he was walking in a neighborhood that, I am told, is adjacent to his, doing absolutely nothing.
Okay, so you've heard that the man in the video, which is a white Army non-commissioned officer, he's basically telling this black man, look, you don't belong in our neighborhood. You don't belong here. Leave the neighborhood. And of course, he put his hands on him. He shoved him. But we already know that the mindset that exists here in this country is that a lot of people already feel like, oh, he had a right to protect his neighborhood, when the only one hurling threats was the Army non-commissioned officer. He's the only one hurling threats. So basically what they're saying is you can't jog through our neighborhoods, you can't walk through our neighborhoods, you can't talk in our neighborhoods. But one point I wanted to bring out in all of this is, now that you've done this, now you got a crowd of people in your neighborhood protesting. So now I'm pretty sure your neighbors are saying to themselves, look at what you've brought to the neighborhood. Well, some of them are probably saying, you know, now I understand why people don't like them and all of this kind of stuff. Now get this. There was a recent story within the past few months or so, where a crowd or group of white people went to a black guy's house, a young teenager actually, and confronted him and his mom about something that supposedly happened with a girl. Okay? They went as a crowd to intimidate. Now, you all know that in the past when they showed up with a crowd, that it wasn't just about intimidation. Somebody was getting lynched that day. But see, they expect us to forget about that recent history and be okay with the fact that a crowd of them are showing up at the door demanding to see the young man in question. But it amazes me that if we did the same thing in reverse, if a crowd of so-called black people showed up at a white woman's door demanding to see their son, come on now. Anybody who thinks that if it were in that direction that people would be okay with it, you are lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself if you believe that you would still think it's fair if a group of black people showed up at a white woman's house to demand to see her son. So it's obvious. It is obvious that things are not fair in this country, but we don't have fair thinking people. So of course, when it's in their direction, they're going to say, well, we have a right to defend our community. But if a group of them show up in our community, they don't feel the same way. As a matter of fact, they can show up with weapons. More than, I think, 2 decades ago, a group of skinheads and white nationalists showed up in a Toledo community. I believe it was Toledo or somewhere in Ohio. And I think it happened in Detroit, too. My husband said it happened in Detroit as well. I'm pretty sure it happened in many communities around this country. But this was more than 2 decades ago, where he said skinheads or white supremacists showed up in black neighborhoods with weapons. And they were just marching up and down the neighborhood. And so their thinking is this: you don't have a right to say anything to us because we have Second Amendment rights. But if we just did the same thing, we're a group of black people. Now, of course, you're starting to see black people now who saying, look, if you're going to march with your weapons, I'm going to march with mine. But nobody likes it when black people do it. Nobody. There's always a double standard in the minds of those who are reprobate. Anyway, I am so tired of talking about and hearing about these things. But these are the times we are living in. And our people need to understand something. I got to say this, got to bring it on back home. You are in the land of your captivity, and it was prophesied. I'm going to say it until you can't take it no more, but it is what it is. In my honest opinion, I believe that the young man who was being accosted and attacked by this white man, by this Army non-commissioned officer, I do believe that the wise thing to do, only because it didn't look like he had a weapon, y'all. I'm talking about because it did not look like he had a weapon. But it's very, very possible that the white guy did have one. And he was probably just waiting for the black guy to reach and do anything or to try to defend himself. Because then at that point, he would have pulled out his weapon and probably killed the young man. He was probably waiting for him to make any gesture towards defending himself against the attack that was happening against him, almost like it was a setup. Now, what I find interesting is in the comment section, I believe it was on AOL, you had someone who said that the black guy set the army officer up. They said that he set him up. So this is what I'm trying to say. You can't convince a reprobate to see things clearly. But what I would say is this. I think it's best that he should have kept it moving. That he should have just gone on back home and got out of their neighborhood. Not because he was supposed to or because he didn't have a right to be there, but only because he could have lost his life because these people are just killing you for no reason. And I think because the cameras were rolling, in which his wife did this, he had no legal right to pull out a weapon and end that young man's life. But he was waiting for a moment. This is my opinion. He was waiting for the young man to gesture back in any way to try to defend himself. Because then they could have spun it and said that they both felt threatened and that I had to take him out. See, they were the ones doing the setup. They were the ones doing the setup, not that young man. Although I do think he should have just left there for the sake of saving his own life because these people are getting away with murder in this country. I do think he should have left, but I believe that they are the ones who were setting him up. And because the camera was rolling, that guy knew that he couldn't just take that young man's life. He knew he couldn't because the cameras would have picked it all up. But one gesture by that young black guy, reaching in the pocket, reaching in the waistband, or even hitting his hand away or pushing him in return after being pushed. Any type of gesture that he would have made to defend himself, that guy would have tried to say that he was defending himself, that he felt threatened. That is the mind trick that these reprobates play. And when I say reprobates, a reprobate can be any color. If the shoe doesn't fit, then don't get offended. If you are not a reprobate, then don't get upset. Because reprobates come in black and white. But in this case, we see that the reprobates are those who will defend this. Those who will defend this action of the army officer. You are a reprobate. If you think that a person can just do these kinds of things, and if another person decides to defend themselves, then they are the ones in the wrong, you out of your mind. I'm done with this video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, share and like this video, and with that, I'm out. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.